Ready to go?
Yep.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Self-Publishing Podcast. There were several moments before we started. Wait for the show. I'd just like to say for anybody who wasn't there, Dave was a big hit at NINC.
He was a huge hit at NINC. He didn't even have to be here. It's amazing.
Wasn't Dave a big hit?
Yes. Can I tell you my favorite question asked last week? And this wasn't like one person asked this. Many people asked us at NINC. They would come up and say, "Is Dave real?" You were totally a part of everything we did, Dave, even though you weren't there.
And it was really cool how quickly people caught on.
Saved me the trouble from going.
Because there were right.
Exactly. It really was efficient.
There were I would say, do you think a third of that audience knew us? Maybe a half?
Oh no, I'd say way less than that if I'm guessing.
Well, I don't think it's less than a third.
Maybe a third then.
Okay, well, whatever. So there were people who knew us.
I reported to Cindy 20% was the number I gave when I got
Okay,
home.
I think it's higher than 20%, maybe significantly. Well, whatever. So, but the point is, some people knew us and some people didn't. So there was, when we made a few Dave references just during the course of because we had kind of the equivalent of a this is my something cool. Okay, hold on. So we're gonna go into today's show is about how to meet reader expectations. We'll get to that. Something cool. Hey Johnny, having something cool? Yes, let's talk about NINC. Okay, so this is actually it. So I'll just go right into it. But that
was really well delivered. Finally crafted.
I know, it's just working. It's like Inception. We had basically kind of the equivalent of a keynote. Really, I mean the entire attendance was there for our session and the one before us.
It was 2 hours on either side of a break.
Right. So we had a 2-hour presentation, and then like a lot of the people when we kind of mentioned some Dave references, you could hear like the faithful thought that was funny and oh yes Dave, ha ha ha. But then through this we persuaded people who didn't know Dave it's like they knew him right away. It's like it was instant recognition. And so later they were like, I want to meet who's this Dave guy? I want to meet this Dave guy. And they were like standing around. We had a campfire retelling of the Very Davy Christmas story from the worst show ever. It was great. And
you should have planned this ahead of time and just had me in a box backstage and just opened me on the last day. Like, here's Dave.
I would love to do that.
Driving to your house and just showing up, and it would have been so awkward.
Seriously considered. Now, granted,
don't give times or distances.
Right. I'm trying very hard not to triangulate here, but Dave was in driving distance of me and Johnny and did not come to visit us.
I have one car. It's a piece of crap, and no, it wouldn't. I would have had to rent a car.
Okay, I'm just saying, if you were in San Antonio, for example, for some reason, I cannot imagine a reason you would be in San Antonio. But let's say you were in San Antonio.
From the law.
On the run for the law. And you're like, dude, I'm Airbnb-ing it in San Antonio, and I'm really scared because there's blood on the blanket here. It's like at least a pinprick worth, and I'm scared. Can you come visit me? Whether you actually need me to visit you or not, there's no way you're in San Antonio and I'm not finding a way to come say hey.
Well, you got 2 cars.
Even if I had one a year ago, I would have still found a way.
Okay, so it's on me now. I should have found a way to come see you. Fuck you.
Well, yes, but we were still considering just driving down to see you. Just how hilarious that would be if we just knocked on your door and you would like not really want to invite us in, but you kind of have to.
You wouldn't come in. I wouldn't invite you in.
Oh, and it would be really like you'd have to. I just can't imagine you wouldn't have anybody to bitch to because we're the ones you normally bitch to. So you would have had to have put on
might implode
of trying to pretend that it was okay and that you were happy to see us, and you would not have remotely been happy to see us. It would have been
I would have been honest.
George, an independent George.
No, if you showed up at my house, I would have been. No, you wouldn't have come in. A, B, I would have yelled at you.
So you really okay?
That's just like what happens when friends come to my house.
Yes. All kidding aside, if we actually knocked on your door, you would turn us away.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I know what Worst Show Ever is all about today. This is a very special episode of Worst Show Ever. Johnny and Sean pretend to go to Dave's. We're gonna role play the whole thing.
Yeah, of course we only have his decoy address.
Wouldn't that be funny if that is a forwarding address?
Right. It's just some guy sitting on a cardboard box.
Like, what if we actually went? We actually took the time. We drove however many hours it is from our place to Redacted, and we get there and we knock, and there's like some lady there, and she's like, "David, who?"
It's a number station.
He died 8 years ago.
There is no Dave.
So Nink was fun. We made a lot of new friends, connected with a lot of existing friends, and I think we'll be seeing some new folks at the Smarter Artist Summit.
Yeah, for sure. It was a really great crowd, and it was awesome how like they were professional. Like everybody there is a working, successful, professional writer, and that was awesome. It was a lot of fun. My something cool is after the shows today and worst show ever and a meeting, I am going to have dinner with my sister.
Sweet. Oh, sorry.
With my sister, whom I have not seen in 30 years. Yeah, that's my whole story.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was thinking the other sister.
No, it's my half sister, and she lives in Arkansas. And last time I saw her, I was 10 years old, and she's driving up to Galveston, and she's like, "Hey, I'm gonna stop in Austin. Let's
what does she
have
want?
dinner."
Do you think it's going to be like that scene in Friends where Denise Richards is Ross's cousin and he hasn't seen her in 30 years?
I think it's going to be exactly like that. That's pretty much what I'm expecting. I can already hear the music. All right, Dave, anything cool besides that you woke up 45 minutes ago? 55 now.
I know we have two something cools. I'll save the other one for the next show. This one, though, Mr. Robot is back for the, I think, third season now.
Ooh, that is something cool. I like that show a lot.
Yes. Watched the first episode and was not disappointed. I won't spoil it, obviously, but I love that show. It's just so good.
Yeah, that show made Alf cool again.
And it opens with, like, I don't want to get into it, but it just, like, I wonder what the, like, every year they do something that you don't see coming. So I'm wondering, like, are they going to do it again this year, or do they not want to fall into like the M. Night Shyamalan trap? But they keep raising the stakes. I don't see how far they can go, and I'm just curious how it's like. It's awesome. I feel like they write themselves into a corner each and every season, and I just want to see how they get out of it.
Oh, that's the best thing to do.
Sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, I love that shit.
Yeah.
Now when we do that, it makes you very uncomfortable, though.
Well, because I'm responsible for coming up with a way out. But if I'm watching someone else do it, like, I want to see what they do.
Oh, see, that's the magic of storytelling. I like getting in a corner and then having to, get the flashlights. Like, that's really fun.
Yes. Well, he's also got a writing team and stuff, so it's a little different.
I just want to object to Sean saying that they made Alf cool again. Come on.
Alf was always cool.
Yes, Alf was never not cool.
That's true. We actually watched an episode of Alf. I'm trying to introduce like one show at a time. We'll watch one episode, watch the pilot. My children were not into Alf. They did not age well.
The exact
Your children are dead to me.
We watched one episode of Alf. They were into it. Not into it.
Please,
yeah.
Call him by his proper name, Gordon Shumway. Thank
you. Did you watch the pilot or a random episode?
I don't remember.
Every episode?
we watched
probably the first one.
We watched the first one. But it's shit, you guys. I really want to watch Three's Company, but I think I might cry if it's as bad as it probably is.
Well, and I think Three's Company is, well, you with your kids, you could probably get away with it, but I think it's way racier than you're probably remembering.
Oh, I'm sure. But
these kids are watching hardcore movies now.
It's true. We're flirting with Goodfellas for Thanksgiving because we did Godfather last year. So we got.
I did listen to the Worst Show Ever episode. What is Dave versus porn? So I'm all prepared to discuss it with my kids.
Oh, that was a good one. That's worth.
For any new listeners from Nink that are like watching or.
We're sorry.
We don't get to the topic until 15 minutes.
Right, but it's 15 minutes. It's time.
1:15. You want to say go? Break?
Go. Yeah. It's all you, Dave.
Oh, I got to
choose from one of your show notes and proceed. For those of you late to the show, Dave did two completely different versions of the show notes.
Okay. Well, since you're going to go there, we got to go into it now. Okay. Another segue here. We use Asana, which I fucking hate. And
brought to you by Asana.
I set up show notes for this a while ago. And then when I went into Asana to find the show notes for this episode, I went to this episode in the thing. I didn't see my show notes. I'm like, well, shit, I guess I didn't do them. I didn't remember. So I did completely new shows, and it's completely different.
Yeah, what's hilarious is that the show notes are from 2 different shows. It's really great.
So we're gonna do the more recent one.
No, I do love that we're so prepared for next time. This is really great. Thank you, Dave.
Fuck you.
All right, so I have version 2.0 up.
Yep, ready to roll.
Okay, so we're talking about meeting reader expectations, and it's the entire process. From what you write to how you deliver it to after the fact. You want your readers to be front and center here, and that's what this show's about. And the first thing, I think, you got to deliver the story that they came to read. If your book looks like a cozy mystery, despite maybe wanting to, you don't want to have an alien invasion like halfway through the story. It might be cool, actually, but you want to create the book an experience that the cover is selling. You want people to have that when they're reading it. You don't want to surprise them, or like with a romance, having like everybody die at the end. Like,
I still think you're going to try that someday. But
I will.
Okay, so what you were just saying about Mr. Robot, right? Which really defies expectations. You think it's going one place and it's going another, but you're saying that's totally fine because that's kind of the promise of the show, right? Is that it's always going to bend and maybe go around corners that you didn't expect. And so that's like how early in the show, because that show did get trippier and trippier. So how early in the show did Mr. Robot indicate to you that we're going to go some pretty crazy places and I just want you to stick along for the ride?
I don't remember. Probably a few episodes in, I think it was hinting at it. But I think at the same time, the genre that it is, it allows
it's a hint enough.
Well, yeah, it's like a sci-fi sort of show, and it's a little trippy, I think. So it's I think that's perfectly allowable in there. I don't think they're really changing. Like the one episode that they did screw things up is when they did the whole beginning of the episode is an 80s sitcom. Like that, they had tried that like in episode 2 or 3.
It'd be too much too soon, right? Okay, so is this a case of Boiling the Frog that you just have to? You can pretty much get away with anything as long as it's a degree at a time.
I suppose. Well, except for the hardcore things like killing all your people in romance and like the rules of the book.
So I'm sure there are people a rule.
Buy them. Yeah,
okay. But if you want to be genre specific and please the readers, which is what this is all about, right? Is pleasing the readers, then there are some rules that you cannot break. Those are just like pillar rules and they hold everything else up. But everything else you can kind of bend. But the fiercer your bend, the more time you kind of have to give it, right? Because people have to be used to the characters and they have to be used to the story. If you try something really shocking in Act 1, then it doesn't have a lot of value.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Well,
you're doing that. You should lead the show.
Well, I mean, to think of the Mr. Robot example, like that's actually not that different from expectations. I mean, I don't think, because the show has always had kind of a weird, there's something not quite right here thing going on with it. And there were a few times where you're like, whoa, what I thought was happening is not happening.
Yeah, okay, Dave, you're hypercritical of shows, and I mean that as a compliment, like in a good way. So what's an example of a show that most of us would be familiar with that just got it wrong? They did not deliver on the promise of the trailer or like the 30-second clips that they play on TV would be the equivalent here.
I think a good example was the beginning of Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Their first several episodes were shit. Absolute horrible. And I think, it's set up. It's a show without heroes. It's basically like spies and stuff. Although they kind of change it up later in the series, I believe, with the Inhumans. But it started off. Promising like this James Bondish sort of Marvel experience, and the first episode was just horribly done. Just awful, I think. But
specifically, what was it about the first episodes that didn't?
There was no mystery, no mystery at all. Absolutely no mystery, no real intrigue, no. no wondering what's going on. It was very simple, very cardboard characters, very badly written. But as the show progressed, they found the characters and they found the mystery, and it actually delivered later in this season.
Okay, so here's a question. Like, how much of that is, and this applies to books. Like, I love that we're talking about this in terms of big, like, pop properties that we can all, like, sink our minds into. But with this, how much of your expectation did you bring to what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be versus the average, like, viewer? So did they totally, I know they did miss the mark. A lot of people were like, oh, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. sucks right away, right? But what is it? Did the trailer promise more mystery than it delivered? Or do you, because that's the first thing you always say is, it doesn't have enough mystery for me, right? That's like your driving force in a piece of entertainment, whether it's a book or a TV show or a movie. You want that mystery, like, keep going, because I want my questions answered. So was it in the way that they advertised that show to you that suggested there would be mystery? Or did you come to it expecting mystery because that's what you want from a show?
Well, I mean, it's like a spy show. There should be some world building going on. There should be something. There was just nothing. It was just like, I can't even explain it well. It was just shit. It was just shit.
So you were expecting you were expecting something like Alias, where there's this whole mythology that carries.
Did it well, because you open up with, I don't even remember how it opened. Like, I think she was almost killed or whatever, or boyfriend, whatever. But you're wondering, what the fuck? Oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? Like, in deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole you go, and like, you have no clue what's going on.
Okay, so this is cool because I've never actually seen this show, so this is really great. So it sounds to me like the show that they delivered is more like an old, like the real old Mission Impossible. It's like the TV show where
not even that good.
But each episode was just, there was no mythology. It was just, here's the adventure of the week.
Yeah,
right?
With Marvel, you expect mythology.
Right. And so Marvel has this cinematic universe. You think they're going to borrow on the world and borrow on the mythology. So you felt let down. So that's exactly what you're saying. Now, if they had a mystery that they didn't deliver in the first episode, but they gave you the confidence to know that it was coming, that would be boiling the frog. That would, like, it's a simmer. But they didn't do any of that, is what you're saying. They had to actually kind of almost forcibly find themselves later because people were pissed. Is that what happened?
I don't know if it was something where they changed course or if they had always planned it this way. Like, okay, we're going to just take our time and do it our way. And I haven't gone back to watch it again to see if there were hints of the good stuff that was to come earlier. There may have been. But
well, that's actually what I want to talk about now, is setup and delivery, right? And you're saying that the show, you're not even sure if they did that. They did kind of rectify things, but
yeah, I feel like they changed things up mid-course. I think they realized there were problems and they fixed them, and they had some mystery. You didn't know who was doing what, where allegiances were, like stuff you expect from a comic book or spy story.
Well, like Winter Soldier was super good because it was a spy story. Like, that's what made it exceptional.
Yeah, and the first Captain America movie sucked.
Oh, I hate the first Captain America movie.
It was so boring.
I hated it so much.
But and that kept you from the second one, right? Like, for a while.
Long time.
Yeah.
Yes,
and a bunch of people saying I expected, they were setting my expectations for shit. And I'm like, you aren't meeting my reader expectations, my viewer expectations. You set up a shitty movie.
But that's exactly it. Like, expectations go both ways, right?
Well, the thing about expectations is, if you violate, this is kind of a hard concept to explain. Violating expectations, so delivering something other than what was promised, is a big enough transgression that you usually can't even make up for it by the new thing being better, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah,
so
I agree.
It's not about, did you deliver something awesome, as much as it's, you didn't deliver what you promised. That's a bigger no-no. And it kind of reminds me of what they say, say about brands. You know, your brand, this is a little bit of a deviation, but stick with me. Your brand, your company's brand, your personal brand as an author, whatever it is, it's promising something regardless. No brand doesn't promise anything. The question is, are you aware of it and consciously steering what you're promising? Or are you just promising willy-nilly and not even being aware of what you're promising? And that's the sort of thing with a book. Like, you need to be aware first and foremost of what you are promising with a cover, with a description, with the first page, all that stuff. I don't know where you were going with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's the thing about this is whatever, I mean, what you started to say about setup and delivery, whatever you set up, you need to deliver. It's Chekhov's gun. It's. I wish I knew the quote because I misquote it all the time.
It's I don't know it exactly either, but if there's a gun on the mantle in, chapter 3, then in Act 1, it needs
gun.
Yeah. So, but
it will show something. Although Hitchcock, clear exception to that rule, he was always showing.
Yes, but that's because he knew exactly what he was doing and why. That was misdirection. You can always misdirect, but again, that's knowing the rules so that you can break them.
It doesn't look sloppy,
Right.
Is it an accidental forgetting, basically?
Well, I think that the real rule is that everything needs a purpose, right? And so if you have a gun and its purpose is to kill somebody later in the book, that's a purpose. If you have a gun and its purpose is to misdirect the reader to think that guy is going to be the assassin, well, then it served its purpose, even if that's all it is misdirection. But if it's just you mention a gun because the guy collects guns and it's like in no other way relevant to the story, well, that's you're not supposed to do that. You're shining a lantern on something and saying this is important. Every word that you choose in your story is you shining a lantern. So
I think that's something that you tend to do in first drafts a lot, or as a beginning writer a lot, because you're still finding the story and you're not sure what is really going to matter. Like something that might seem like it'll matter early on, especially if you're pantsing it, won't matter as much as you progress into the story because you found something better. And that's something you have to go back and actually fix. Like, okay, well, why did I mention that gun if clearly it's never going to be used? And then take it out, or whatever the stand-in for the gun is.
But on the other side of that, don't second guess yourself and think, oh, well, I need this later. I don't know if I should put it in. Put it in, but just pay attention during your second time through and your third time through. And when you have other people look at your work, ask them questions like that. Did anything stand out? Is anything out of place? Because that's embarrassing in a final draft. You don't want that.
Yeah. So something else I think a lot of beginning writers do, and this is like one of those things that will push me away from a book immediately, is a lot of exposition up front. I think a lot of writers want to explain their world, and sometimes, like in a rough draft, we all do it, I think, except Johnny. His first drafts are like super clean, but we
I thought there was going to be an insult, but that was a sincere compliment. I'm so
sorry.
unexpected.
Wait. I think
didn't meet my expectations.
I think Dave has complimented both yours and my writing in the same week. And that's never happened in the history of this company. So we thought last week was a big deal for this company. It's all about this week.
But I like, even when I'm writing, I'm especially when I'm pantsing or even fleshing out something I might have already outlined, I'm feeling my way around the world, and you can't leave that on a page where you're doing it too much because you're explaining the world.
Well, no, and you always find that in the first draft. So even though Johnny's drafts are clean, like they're grammatically clean, they're articulate, the writing is clear, but there's always way more than we need. Because of exactly that. He has to explain things to himself so that it makes sense and he understands, but the reader doesn't need all that explanation. So in your first draft, you should never be afraid of overwriting. Don't ever be afraid of over-explaining. Just don't be stupid later and leave it all there and think the reader cares about, you figuring it out on their time. It's not. You need to be lean in the drafts, but not in the creation phase. That's, when you're outlining, that's pure ideation. And when you're drafting for that first time, it's getting those ideas in a logical order with kind of all the places filled, but it makes sense to have more. Some people underwrite. They do exactly the opposite. They get the skeleton there the first time so they can add more details in later, which is really the same thing, just kind of the opposite. So whatever your comfort level is, that's where you should do. Don't do what feels or what you think is right. Do what actually does feel right. If you want to overwrite and trim back later, do that. If you want to underwrite and go back later, do that. But just make sure that the end result for the reader really delivers on everything that you set up. Not too much information, just enough. And like Dave's always preaching, keep that mystery going. Make sure that they have reasons to keep turning the pages.
Yeah, when you know everything right off the bat, what's a sense of exploring? I think this is especially true of like open world video games. Like I don't like to know too much about going in. Like I want to know if the game's good, so I'll check out reviews, but I'm not going to watch like 25-minute Let's Plays because I want to experience the world myself for the first time and be impressed by its wonder and all of that and discover these things on my own. When you just explain everything right away, though, it just, why even bother going on?
Well, Dave is particularly interested in mystery. But there are other methods of propulsion if you don't necessarily have mystery in your story, depending on your readership. You basically, you need a reason. Your goal as an author is to keep them turning the pages. Sometimes it's just to see what happens. You know, it may not be a mystery, but like these two people had a fight. How's it going to resolve? You know, that's kind of a boring example. These people headed off to Vegas and there's a roadblock. Are they going to make it through? You know, those sorts of things. You want to always look for propulsion in your story. Stagnation is bad. And by every time you do that, you're opening a loop because somebody wants to see what happens later. Either it's with a secret or with an unresolved action. And the reader's brain is holding those open, right? If you want to get them to the end propulsively, like they want to keep reading, and then satisfied, not just to the end, but satisfied so that they buy your next book, they buy another book by you. And that last, the end that doesn't get tied up is just, it's like a splinter. It's like, what, great ending, but what was the thing? Like what happened with that? Like that's what they're going to focus on. And then they might not get your next book.
Yeah. That's something, you know, even though Yesterday's Gone was a serial and, you know, we pitched it as such, there are like if you read the first season, we don't answer the questions. You know, we were going the Lost model. We wanted to, you know, have that go on a while. We answered the questions in season 3, actually. We didn't wait till season 6. I suppose we could have done that. But people that aren't familiar with serials, or maybe, you know, we didn't explain it well enough. I don't know. There are some people that were just, well, what the fuck? I got like part of a story. Even though it's like 600 pages, it's part of a story. I don't know what the hell. I still don't know what the thread is.
Well, right. And we could have done a better job messaging on that. But even having said that, I think we did better than anybody else at the time because we changed the language. That was a specific, that was specific on our part to meet those reader expectations and not fail. So by calling our books episodes and seasons, we were trying to draw a very direct line between here's behavior that you already understand in this other context that we're now relating to Kindle and, you know, reading in a mobile device. And that was a new thing. And so we didn't want people to feel ripped off or, hey, I thought I was going to get a book, like, you know, with an ending and acts and everything. Well, no, actually, Dave and I are just making it up as we go along, 20,000 words at a time. So those are episodes. And when we have 6 of them together, that's a season. And, you know, we do a little bit of that explanation in the product descriptions. Just to explain, you know, this is like episodic television, and we talk about things like Lost in the product description. And all of that is a very exacting, strategic way of communicating with the reader so that they're not disappointed. They're not reading the book and thinking, this is less than I expected.
So going back to what Johnny was saying, though, about propelling you forward and stuff, you definitely want conflict in your story. Conflict drives the action. And you also want, and this is one that's really difficult, even for me now, having things happen, but your character's not just reacting. They have urgency. They make choices which kind of set up the next thing. And I think to me, it's still difficult to do that because sometimes it feels like, okay, everything is happening to my character. You know, he or she doesn't really have too many choices sometimes, and I still find that difficult to write around, but it is something you want to do. You don't want it to just be like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Do you guys have any?
No, I actually like when a character has a choice, and the choice is, I mean, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as Sophie's choice, right? But what makes Sophie's choice so?
I choose neither.
Well, it's that, okay, you have this really, really terrible situation or a terrible choice, and then here's your choice. It's something even more terrible. This is something that Dave is especially good at, actually, is this kind of it is the Sophie's choice.
It can't always get worse.
Yeah, you're right. You have a decision between something terrible and something worse. And that, I think that can really
collective inkwell.
It can really grip the heart of a reader. And it doesn't have to be, like torture or death or anything like that. It could be,
but it's best if it is.
It could be the loss of a loved one, or it could be a bad grade in school. Like this could be done in any degree,
or loss of dignity or something. I mean, I'm thinking of something from the McKee dialogue book where he talks about people never reveal their true, I forget the phrasing he uses, but it's like their true motivations, their true desires, unless they're threatened with something worse. Do you remember the way that was phrased?
I don't remember the way it's phrased, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's very true. It's a matter of what is at risk for this person and what are they going to have to surrender to get like the second best thing. Like it can be pretty bad. And because we as humans want to see, I mean, we look at the other side of traffic. We do, even though we all know it slows the people behind us down and we're cursing the people ahead of us. Like if everybody stopped looking, there wouldn't be a jam. But when it's our turn, we look. In fact, Johnny and I had I won't go into it now, but we had a harrowing thing at NINC where we saw a tragedy and we were very curious about what happened. Like,
wow, look at that open loop, because motherfuckers are going to want to know now.
All right.
Don't. Okay.
No, if we get through all of this, then we'll circle back because it is a good story. But that's the whole point. I don't want to
open loop. We're propelling you guys to the end of the episode.
We're propelling. But
guys, try to stop listening now, bitches.
We really did. We went out of our way to ask people what happened because we wanted that loop closed. People do want to peek in on other people's lives and find out. So I think those kind of secrets or decisions, or that can always drive urgency, and urgency is a wonderful way to craft your story.
I'm going to make people listen to Worst Show Ever to hear that story because it's not an SPP story, and I can see where it would go in Worst Show Ever.
Yeah, you're right. It's really good.
Synergy here, some cross promotion.
That's right.
Can we call it the one with the? Actually, that would blow the punchline. Never mind.
The one with the open loop, though. Yeah. So, wow. I'm just wondering what you people are thinking right now.
Okay. Well, what about beyond the book? Like once you're done with the book, if you've crafted or you've done your job, you've met reader expectations, your reader is really happy, you have that 5-star review, and you have somebody who is moving from being a reader to a fan to a super fan. What next? Like how available should you be? How do you take a person who really liked your book and move them over to a different relationship?
Well, I think it starts with your back matter. I mean, that's the first thing people are going to see after the book is over. And you want to either get them to your mailing list so you can, have conversations with them. It's kind of like asking for a second date with a reader in hopes of a long-term relationship. And you want to get off on the right foot there. You don't want to be too pushy, but you also want you extend an invitation, basically. So a mailing list, if they join your mailing list, they get a free book, a free short story, or something that makes it worthwhile, not just, hey, join my list.
Can it be the coordinates to your house? Because I feel like that would be a really good cookie for your list.
I guess it depends who you are, maybe. And you also want to give them information about the author, or an author's information about the story. Like I loved the reason Stephen King, I think, stood out to me early on, especially with his short stories, is that they had author's notes that went with them. I like peering behind.
The bizarre one.
The what?
It's called the Something Bizarre.
No, I mean 4 Seasons and Skeleton Crew were the first ones I had.
Oh, I thought you meant the latest one, his newest one.
No, I haven't read that. No, I'm talking about early on. Like this is one of the things that really made King stand out to me, and the fact that he had author's notes and a lot of other writers didn't made him stand out to me more. It's like I started looking for author's notes with other books and other collections of stories, and when I didn't get them, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, well, you obviously don't care as much about
Well,
me.
It's also like his author notes are really instructive because he's not writing, they're not all authorial, like this is how I was feeling when I wrote this book. Like it's really
conversational.
Yeah, it is still about him, but it's about him, how it relates to you. And he's talking to you. He's calling himself Uncle Stevie, right? So it's
That
just
doesn't sound creepy at all. Come sit on Uncle Stevie's lap.
well,
Let's play the tickle game.
there is a little bit of sit on Uncle Stevie's lap, but it's perfectly creepy. I don't know. Stephen King is just so warm when you finish with this book and he's letting you inside his head for just a couple of minutes. And I very much think that we try to do that with our books and, reach out to the reader and say hello. And like I'm writing an author's note for a short right now that we just finished. And Dave's absolutely right. It's a way to directly touch the reader. And I think that it's easy to think of them. Johnny wants to say something about that. It is a way to touch the reader. And that's what we want. We want to find ways to communicate with them that aren't just the stories that we tell. And if we don't think of an author's note as a box to check or, like something we have to be done with.
Or an opportunity to upsell.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like make it a time to bond with the reader, and you will not just meet reader expectations, but that's a chance to exceed them.
And then you have you might have links to your other books there, or better yet, a link to your website that has, the most recent list of books. Also, and about the author page, just so people, just a paragraph or two that people can get to know you and, how you want to present yourself to your genre. Like if you're writing fantasy or something, you might want to talk about, how you're into playing D&D and stuff. Something that, just like a brief introduction that will, get people interested. And I think that goes to the next thing is like communicating with your readers. Like once you have the email list or you have them at your blog or whatever, then begins the relationship of actually communicating with them and talking to them and, being available to them.
How available, Dave?
Always give me your phone number and everything.
Well, no, I actually mean this seriously. Like, because all three of us have different ways of communicating with our readers, and actually even four, because I would say that our romance pen name, there's like differences there too.
Yeah.
So I mean, everyone in the company has seen Dave email where there's 3,000 word emails. Like he really goes out of his
finish his story today.
Well, it is funny that 3,000 is the projected hopeful word count each day, which I think he gets that in email for sure, not necessarily in narrative. But it's true. Dave does everything he can to really tap into every reader, and if somebody sends him anything, he really does everything he can to respond with 100% of his true self. Even if it's something negative, he responds with his true, like, grr, Hulk self. But he does care, and he does respond. I try to respond to everything I can, everything I see, but it's a few sentences. Even if I have something that is detailed and long that gets to me, I will use my time to read it and to process it, but I won't send anything long back. Almost always it'll be as articulate as I can get in a short period of space, because I have to kind of keep moving.
So when we're talking about expectations, let's address the idea of like, books, familiar books, right? So the opposite, Dave's concern about you get the same book every time because, that's been done before. So is there a danger when you're meeting reader expectations that you're doing the same book over and over again? I mean, I think my quick answer is that you want to meet certain things and surprise them in other ways.
Yeah, the cynical side of me says people want to read the same story over and over.
Do you have two sides?
Yeah, there is two.
What's the other side?
The angry side.
The slightly less cynical side.
Okay, that sounds like the day we all know. Go.
I think people do want the same experience, but done a little bit differently. Now, that's not to say I do that, and I don't like to do that, but I think, like, okay, a good example of this is Stranger Things. I think did we all see that? Did you see it, Johnny?
No, I didn't see it.
Okay.
How hyped are you for season 2?
Very much, and that's what I'm going to get to. Season 1 we absolutely loved. I think there's a huge expectation for season 2. But I think if you really ask somebody what they want from season 2, most people will probably say more of the same. I don't want a complete different thing. I want more of that. I like that experience.
Okay, so okay, so my answer for Stranger Things is I just want them to take it wherever they want to go. Like, I'm totally down for the ride. That's the way I was with Lost. I didn't care about what the ending was. I just really appreciated the journey.
But I would be disappointed if they try to get all fancy and show off, we can do something really awesome and like just kill everyone in episode 1 and start something completely different. Like, I like what that show offered was like this very nostalgic, friendly sort of science fiction 80s vibe to it. You feel like these kids are friends you might have had or something.
Have you seen it yet, Dave?
No, I haven't. I want to. But it's like a warm experience. It's a feel good sort of thing. Yes. But Stranger Things. It's a feel-good experience, but it's also got terror and horror there. And I think that kind of taps into a lot of your childhood fears and stuff. And I think the show does it really well. And I think, I want more of that. I want more of that in season 2, season 3. But, you want to add some new stuff to it, obviously. But you also want to maintain the thing that worked, what worked about the first season, and continue that. But I think, some people might want to do it. I mean, Mr. Robot is not going to give you the same thing every season. It's, but it in a way it is because it's changing.
Right.
There's been a number of but there have been book series. I don't want to really name specifics because I don't want to like shit on anybody. But where you read one book and you like it, and you read the next book and you go, they changed.
Yeah.
Even something like the tense.
I know exactly what book you're talking about.
Right. But there's been plenty of other things too, where like the second season of a TV show is like there's a whole bunch of TV shows where, okay, so this isn't an example of what I'm talking about because it's a different thing, but like, how American Horror Story has a different.
That's so funny. It's exactly where it's going.
Right?
Yes.
And I know that's different, but there are acceptable changes in there.
Well, that's because that show, I actually just started watching that show yesterday, as a matter of fact. And it's my something cool for the next.
Oh, you'd never seen
show.
Any of
I've
that?
never seen it, but I knew the premise.
Yeah,
I knew the premise and that it was an anthology show and that they change it every season. And I think that's awesome. I love that. It makes it really easy because I started on season 6, right? It didn't matter. But that show set that up from the very beginning. You can't just be crazy because then you're jumping the shark. It's like, did you guys ever watch Desperate Housewives? And please don't make fun of me. Just yes or no.
No.
All right. So in that show, it set it up like pretty reasonably well that first season. There was decent mystery, Dave. There was mystery. I bet you've seen it.
No, I haven't.
You really haven't? Okay. No. They did a good job with the mystery and all that.
I mean, I am not one that will. I mean, I loved soap operas when I was younger, so it's not like I'm above it.
Oh yeah, it's very soap opera.
I just wasn't. It just didn't catch my interest. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was
Hitchcock.
Yeah, I think we made it to like season 3, and then we just bailed because it jumped the shark. It kept trying to bend things that didn't need to be bent. And so it would get more and more outrageous. And when you're upping the ante on your readers like that, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing this thing? Because you can't go back. You open these doors to absurdity. You can't close them again. And
you have a bomb go off and destroy the neighborhood. You really can't start over and see.
Yeah. So case study. Honestly, this is actually, I think, kind of an interesting. Let's see where this goes. Weeds.
I was just thinking that
versus Breaking Bad.
Oh,
like
yeah,
both
that's
drug shows.
Great parallel.
And they could, but Breaking Bad escalates. Like he gets into bigger and bigger operations. He's in with the Mexican cartels. He's like bigger enemies, bigger batches, bigger stakes. And Weeds just did weird shit. Like there was that whole season where
it just got stupider every season until the end season when you're just praying that it was just so bad. It was just so bad.
It was like they made it up as they went along and like, let's see what shocking thing we can do. But when you do that early on and you don't do it in a very calculated sort of way, like you said, where do you go from here? And that's what happened. You just stopped caring because, okay, we saw all this crazy shit happen. You've removed them out of the neighborhood at one point, and that really That was what I liked about the Neighborhood.
Right, that was their
familiar
anchor.
Trappings.
Yes, it was their anchor, and at the end of season 2, they just burnt it down. And
yeah, that was the worst thing ever.
It leaves the viewer, or a reader, if we're talking about books, really unseated, and that's not fair. Like it's exactly what we're saying. You're making a promise. Weeds made a promise, and by season 3, they had totally failed on that promise. Breaking Bad's promise.
The opening song was what, Little Houses? I don't know.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
And they changed it. That was the promise, was a suburban mom, selling food, basically. Whereas with Breaking Bad, it's in the title. He's just going to get worse and worse.
Right, and just because you still have her, sucking down an iced latte in season 5 doesn't make it the same show. It was fundamentally different, and that was disappointing. But the premise for Breaking Bad, which is Mr. Chips turns to Scarface, like, it never flinched from its premise on day one.
But even so, all along, that show was rooted in reality. There were his family, even like when things got bad with his family, not to spoil anything, but that family was there, and there were things that kept him and the show grounded in reality in a way that Weeds just was unmoored. It was like a boat lost at sea, and you just didn't care where they went after that.
Yeah, the same showrunner for that is the one who does Orange is the New Black.
Yeah, and notice she put them in a fucking jail, so they can't get out. They're
no,
it's a new season where they escape and together.
They're on a cruise ship.
They did have the first 2 seasons of that show were a little bit different. They had like a parallel stories that were happening outside the prison in her old life, and they wisely got rid of that to focus on their hedgehog concept, which was a bunch of women in prison, and the show is much better for it. But I think that show shows a lot more restraint than Weeds did, for sure.
That restraint, I think, helps you explore, okay, well, what would we really do in this situation, and keep it real.
Well, I mean, but to my point earlier, like, I was talking to somebody the other day about romances are very formulaic. Like, that's not just shit on the genre. I love writing them, but they are formulaic. Like, that's the truth. They're these same obligatory scenes you need to have in every single one, more or less, or readers get pissed. Like, it's a little bit more like a blueprint. That said, number one, you can color inside the lines all crazy different ways. You can tell the same basic story in a contemporary romance or romantic suspense or erotic romance or whatever. But you have to obey those fences. Otherwise, you are violating reader expectations. And that's the question, is how much do you want it to feel like a repeat of an existing story versus how much is just the comfort of a familiar framework and familiar beats?
It is a weird thing, like, where well, one, I think as an artist, we want to bring something new to everything. We don't want to do the same thing over and over. We also want to, hey, look how original I am. I did this different thing. But at the same time, readers, what do they want versus what you want? And I think romance is a particularly tricky one, because I imagine that there are readers that do get sick of reading the same thing, although they're probably in a very minority. So how do you also appeal to them and keep the other readers that want the same sort of story over and over?
I think you have to color inside the lines. You have to know what is an allowable deviation and what is not.
You also have to make a decision, right? Is this about you or the reader? Because it's okay if it's about you, if like that's where your preference as an author is to tell the stories that you want to tell no matter what. That's perfectly acceptable, but you have to know that and understand that you're probably going to suffer in success a little bit. I mean, as far as success, if you define that by number of total readers, because readers do want what readers want. And if you're more worried about pleasing yourself than them, that's not a bad thing, but you do have to understand that there are consequences for that.
And know what the project is. So Sean and I were talking about a project that I actually outlined, and it's definitely romantic, but it's atypical and it doesn't have a happy ending. And Sean goes, that's what makes it literature. Like it's not a
Right.
it could be a romance if like one or two things were changed, but it's not, and that makes it literature. It's not a romance.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, I think we're talking about the same story. I love that story. I thought it was a beautiful story. But yeah, it takes some romance conventions, but it really toys with them, and that is fine if that's the story you're going to tell.
Template, basically, but I had to tweak it. I had to understand it was not romance because it didn't have a typical happily ever after.
So but we have to sell that differently, then, right? You have to have
very much so.
Oh, absolutely. So
how do you let people know, hey, this isn't your traditional?
It's in a different genre, and the cover has to speak to. Although the cover that I'm thinking of could go either way, but you don't put it in romance.
Not really though. This cover is a romantic looking cover, but it's not necessarily a romance. It definitely looks like literary fiction. It looks like women's literary fiction. It's a beautiful cover, but there's not a couple on it. There's just a woman, and you don't see her face. You see her back, and you see a reflection in water, and it's a beautiful cover, and it's stirring. Like you get feelings when you see it. And the story that we were mapping out to fit that had to have romance in it, like deeply so. But it also could not follow it wasn't a romance, it's literature. And so we bent that. But how did we answer that reader objection? The copywriting on the tagline, it very much says that it's not a romance. The cover says that it's not a romance. And the project description says it's not a romance, along with the genre. So those are all reader cues. But if we classified this in romance, then we would be breaking reader expectations, and they'd have every right to give us, 1-star reviews.
Now, the last thing I have here was as far as reader expectations, and this is like a little bit beyond the book, was blogging and behind the scenes stuff. We've talked about blogging before on here, and I think for most people, it's probably not a good use of time. But I think there's a lot of bloggers out there that, if you have a voice and you have something to talk about, do it. I think Joanna Penn and Chuck Wendig are good examples of people that are doing that. But they're also
our guest in the next episode, Queen McDonald. He has a blog. Like there are people who it's a really good idea for them, but it is harder in fiction than nonfiction.
Too.
Right, but look at all three of those: Chuck, Joanna, Dave. All of them are writing to writers, and we would never ever suggest that you do that. So you want to write fiction where Queeves is actually a good example because he's a comedy writer, and people who like his writing would probably also like his books. So there's a path there. You have to think about the reader journey. So what is it that if they are experiencing this, what else can you give them? Where else can you lead them? Where else can you send them? So blogging has to be an extension of your natural brand. If you're like, oh, I hate blogging, but I think I should do it, you absolutely should not. Blogging is really, really far away from an automatic thing. Think if it's something you would want to do anyway and you enjoy it and it's an outlet, those are all reasons to do it. If you think there's going to be a direct link between that and boosted book sales, that might be a story you're telling yourself.
And it's also an area where you could either bond deeper with your readers or drive readers away. If you're writing about politics, and let's say you're writing men's action thrillers and you might be a liberal, well, that might push away half your audience. That's one of those things you have to be aware of. Like how willing are you to be yourself, and will yourself stand in the way of sales to your audience? And lastly, I had the thing here was like behind the scenes stuff that we do at Sterling and Stone. We do the show, what backstory we call it?
Backstory, yeah.
Where we have like a podcast where we talk about a book that readers can get download the audio for it. And it's kind of like Chris Hardwick's Talking Dead and other shows that he hosts. It's just us talking about the thing that we did. And I see other authors like using YouTube and stuff. And this is one of the things, again, if it's something that you feel natural about and there's a conversation there.
It has to be native to you. Otherwise, you'll hate it.
It has to be good. And especially like if you have a series that really takes off and you have like a forum where you can talk about it with readers, I think that's awesome. And the readers that are there and like tune in to like your YouTube or whatever, they're going to be more invested in you as an author and your stories. So that helps. And that's the last thing I got.
Awesome. Well, I guess that'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for listening. If you're not checking out Story Shop, maybe I can mention that. You should check out Story Shop. It's at storyshop.io. There's a free trial of all the functionality, and you can use the actual writer for free for up to 3 stories forever. Storyshop.io. And that's it. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everyone.